This evening, despite another snow day on a Monday board meeting, we have Hannah Rogers and her lovely family who have ventured out through the icy cold and have come to us from Portage Path Community Learning Center. Hannah Mackenzie Rogers is a merit roll student in Mrs. Cleo Lockhart's 3rd grade class at Portage Path CLC. She always turns in her completed assignments on time, and her favorite subject is math. She is a great leader in class and is always willing to help others. Her positive attitude and her bright smile make her one of the treasured gems at Portage Path CLC. She was chosen by Portage Path Student of the Month for the month of September, so right off the bat, that's good. And Hannah is a student at the Martell School of Dance. She has danced at the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Canton Charge Games. Welcome, Hannah.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We should have had you break some music and dance. Hold on a second. Wait, that's Mr. Williams, and that's the one I told you about.
What?
It was good. I said he's good.
Hang on one second.
Well, he's having good knowledge.
Okay, let's do this. Thank you.
All right, before you leave, why don't you introduce, because you brought your whole family with you. Tell us who came with you.
My dad, my mom, my grandma, and my grandpa.
Thank you for bringing her, and thank you for all being here to support her as well. Now, I know you don't have homework because we had a snow day, but you all do not have to stay. You are free to go back out into the cold, unfortunately. All right. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Keep up the good work, Deanna.
All right. Despite the cold, I know there are places you all have been. Would anyone like to go first for community and school reflections? Anyone? Everybody's been staying home and hibernating. Well, I had a couple things that I went to. Despite the cold, all the bands in the rounds, choirs in the rounds have started, so there are some this week as well. We managed to get through. Did we get through all of it? Oh, we didn't. Thursday night we had orchestra, didn't we? So we'll have to reschedule that one. I got to go to the high school bands in the round on Tuesday night. On Wednesday was the biographical tea at Miller South. If you've never been, that is a fantastic event. The 5th graders all dress up as a character, and they have to act like that character the entire tea, and you get to have sweets. So next year I'll make sure the board gets invited to that. And then Friday evening was the jazz dinner dance for the Firestone High School Band at Greystone Hall, which was lovely, and we had alumni bands come back and play. It was great to see how many of our students are still continuing their music even after they leave us and go on to college and beyond. Anyone else want to share anything else? We don't have Veronica here to...
Well, I'll share that I wish I'd have gone to that Friday night thing. I saw it on my calendar today, and I was kicking myself.
Oh, no.
I love that they had at Elk, they had that jazz festival a few Saturdays ago, and I sat there with Mr. James and watched these bands, and I haven't been there in a second. I just got to get on top of the calendar.
They do sneak up on you. I can't believe it's the first week of March next week. So, all right. With nothing else to share, we do have David Jennings here from the library, and he is going to make a presentation to us. He's got some paperwork for us. Mr. Jennings.
2 handouts while I talk. One's just a snapshot of the library, and the other is about the issue itself. Want me here?
Sure, that'd be great.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Superintendent James and Board President Mansfield for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm David Jennings, I'm Director of the Atchison Summit County Public Library. And just a few quick words about our library system. We just celebrated our 140th year of service to the community. I'm sorry. We serve about 2/3 of the county, and our service area is about 377,000 people. And I'd like to point out that we have 285,000 library card holders, which is 75% of our service area. And we're pretty proud of that. I don't think there are too many institutions or organizations that can say that 3/4 of their service area is actively engaged with what they do. We have main library with 17 branch libraries of interest to the Akron Public Schools. 9 of those branches are in the city of Akron. Our annual statistics are there in the handout. And I would like to mention that we've received national recognition for the last 6 years, since '09, as a Star Library Journal, which is the primary industry periodical. Out of 7,500 public libraries in the country, we're one of only 258 that have received that recognition. It's been every year since '09. Having said all that, I've come here to talk to you about our tax levy issue that's going to be on the ballot on May 5th. And this is an issue that is going to be for a renewal of our 1.4 mil operating levy and an increase of 0.5 mils. We've had a property tax levy since 1984. This current 1.4 mils represents about half of our annual operating revenue, and it expires in 2015. As you all are aware, funding from the state of Ohio has been challenging over the last 5 or 6 years. For the public libraries of our state, this has been acutely true. Since budget cuts from the state began in '09, our cumulative loss during that period of time has been more than $18 million. When we compare our funding from the state now in 2014 to 2006 to '08, we received $3.5 million less in state funding in 2014. Meanwhile, the double whammy of this is that our annual revenue from our property tax levy has also declined by over $1 million due to reappraisal of property and loss of property value. So the combination of that is a loss of about 17% of our annual operating revenue, and when compared to 2008. This would be the equivalent, I think your budget's around $300 million. This would be equivalent to the Akron Public Schools losing about $50 million. So it's been a huge challenge for us. Without the 0.5 mil increase, our library system will face significant decline in our ability to serve the public. And this is our first request for additional millage in 11 years. For the $100,000 homeowner, as you see there, our current levy costs $4.08 a month, or $49 a year. The increase would mean an additional $1.46 a month, or $17.50 a year. So the total of this levy, 1.9 mils, would cost the $100,000 homeowner $5.54 a month, or $66.50 a year. This thing's in your handout about what would happen if we're unable to pass this levy in 2015. We're in total cataclysm. You know, we essentially lose half our funding, and that's something I don't want to ponder, but it would be a tremendous disaster for our library system. I do want to point out how we have responded to these budget challenges over the last 6 years. We have reduced our operating budget in all areas, including a $2 million reduction in personnel costs. We now have 56 fewer full-time equivalents. 16% of our staff has been. We did not lay anybody off. I'm proud of that, but we did one job at a time. But we've significantly reduced our folks. Reduced our budget in every category. What we spend on CDs, books, DVDs, delayed upgrades, computer hardware and software, postponed repairs and maintenance of our facilities, and finally in 2014, we had avoided cutting our hours in '09. Many of the libraries in Ohio cut them back then. We avoided it. But when we received another reduction in 2014, we started to, finally had to wave the white flag and reduce our hours, which we did in 2014. So a particular note, in addition to sustaining our operations and keeping our facilities and staffing levels where it should be, with this additional funding, I wanted to point out some of the things that we should be doing to support education, to support what you all do here, that right now we're not in a position to do. And three of those are outlined here. One of those, I was in Chicago and heard Mayor Rahm Emanuel talking about how the Chicago Public Library had put in place mechanism so that every student in the city of Chicago with a library card could get online tutoring 24/7 if they had a library card. And we want to be able to do that here in conjunction with Akron Public Schools and the other school systems we serve. It's just something we're not in a position to do. Similarly, to make digital devices at all locations available for students. As different school systems move toward digital textbooks, as you all are doing, you know, you're using Chromebooks, we need to have some of those available for students to use to do their homework in our buildings. We're just not in a position to do that. It's something we would do to support what you all are doing. And finally, in-person homework assistance, where we would probably use volunteers, but right now we're not even in a position to hire a volunteer coordinator to make that happen. These are the kinds of things that we need to be doing to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Akron Public Schools and the other systems we support. We're just not in a position to do that with our current funding levels. So I'm here tonight to request, on behalf of Citizens for Library of the Future, that's our campaign committee, to request endorsement for our levy request, and also requesting permission to place yard signs for our campaign on school properties. I feel very strongly and very good about our relationship as an organization with the Akron Public Schools in terms of really trying to work together and support the good work that you all are doing here. So I'd be happy to respond to any questions or comments. President Walker.
Just for historical reference, I went by a building and I saw, I think it may have been Columbus Free Library. And I was trying to figure out what did that mean back then, because here it has Akron Free Library.
Well,
What is that?
the history of public libraries is sort of really aligned with the history of public education in America. In the 1830s and 40s, when public education was beginning, the seeds for public libraries were also being laid. And the Boston Public Library in 1852 created the template that stands to this day for libraries, which are several tenets or structural conditions. One is governed by a community board, like yourselves. Another is taxation to support reading. And lastly, that it would be free to the public. Those three things, and those are still some of the absolute basics of public library services in our country to this day. So that's what that's about.
Any other questions?
I was wondering if you could do that all over again.
Tomorrow at the library, Veronica.
All right, would anyone like to make a motion to support the levy for the libraries on the fifth month?
No, I'd like to make a motion that we endorse the library as well as make available our properties for them to put up signage about the levy.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, roll call please.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. All right, next on our agenda is the approval of our meeting minutes from February 9th, 2015.
So moved. Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions or concerns about the meeting minutes? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Sims? Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Superintendent recommendations.
Madam President, I have before me for your consideration 13.5 personnel recommendations. These recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions about personnel? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes, abstaining from the last two.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes, abstaining from item 33.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
And at this time, I'd like Kathy McVeigh to introduce two additions to our staff.
would you stand, please? Tonight I have with me Paul Doxey. Mr. Doxey has spent the last year or so as a data center manager where he supervised a technical service group of 10 people, maintained client relations and creative standards for team responsiveness. He maintained a 52-site network and implemented a 300-plus access point wireless network. He also implemented Google Apps for Education. Prior to that, he was employed for 7 years as a senior network engineer for Smart Solutions in Cleveland, and in this capacity, he participated in both project work and managed service work for several Cleveland area school districts. While working with these districts, he worked with and/or assumed the role of technology director. While in the position, Mr. Doxey worked on hundreds of different networks, created effective disaster recovery plans, worked with vendors to maintain proper licensing, and acted as a project manager for various installs. In addition to that, he worked for 3 years as a technical consultant, contracting with national companies to work with their local offices. Welcome aboard, Mr. Doxey.
Thank you, thank you. I'm very excited for the opportunity to work with Agricultural Schools.
Thank you.
And short on words.
Mr. Andexler. Bill Andexler has 15 years of experience in the field of transportation, and most recently he's been employed for the last 10 years with Crestwood Local Schools as a transportation manager with duties also in operations and maintenance services. In this capacity, he managed all aspects of the transportation department. His accomplishments included reconfiguring the district for state minimum busing and consolidation of buildings, learning 2 separate student transportation software programs, and being awarded grant money to reduce diesel emissions. Mr. Andexler was also responsible for evaluating and training drivers, routing employees and buses, and instituting safety programs. Prior to Crestwood, Mr. Andexler held the position of transportation consultant for Barberton City Schools. In this position, he updated and rerouted the entire district to be more efficient, evaluated the transportation department, and made recommendations for negotiations. He also worked for Reedstown Local Schools as a transportation supervisor, and in this position, he managed all operations of the transportation department. He revamped the department as well as acted as a negotiator for the Reedstown Board of Education. He's being recommended tonight for our transportation coordinator position. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank the interviewing team and the superintendent and the board for making the recommendation to hire me. I look forward to coming to Akron City.
Thank you.
And I think I would like to say Mr. Doxey is our network systems coordinator. I don't think I actually said that. So I'm sorry for that, Mr. Lund. Thank you.
So when your iPads don't work, it's just fun.
Next, Madam President, I have before me for your consideration 2 motions and 3 resolutions on the consent agenda. These recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved. Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions about the consent agenda? Hearing none, roll call please.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
And finally, Madam President, I have before me for your consideration 11 business affairs recommendations. These recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved. Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions about business affairs?
I'll just have a comment. I did speak to Deborah Folk about item 2, which has to do with a Chariot 3 iScrub 26 Deluxe stand-on floor cleaning machine. And I guess we're getting a deal for 10 grand. I'm used to the $200-300 Dysons, but I guess I'm happy to hear that we're saving money and that that's a necessary item.
I had the same question. It sounded quite deluxe, but apparently they're used in many of our CLCs at this point. And
Yes, and this is the first stand-up type that we have purchased, but in general, they cost $12,000 to $15,000. So our CUE participation allowed us to get this particular item at a little over 10. There's 109,000 square feet of floor to clean at Miller South and many entrances, and at this time of the year, it is a safety hazard not to have the floors in good shape for, the salt and the water that comes in. And they have not had a really good floor scrubber there in a long time. So this is to help improve that. This is also a machine that is ergonomically correct. So by using it properly, we should avoid workman's comp injuries as well. And well maintained, they can last for a little over a decade. So this is a very, very good buy. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Thanks for answering all those questions, too. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Reverend Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Bravo,
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Sen.
Yes.
I have to leave. The State of the Schools addresses tomorrow. I have a few finishing touches to put on the speech. So I'm not gonna talk about anything new tonight. It'll all be announced tomorrow. The other thing I want to say is our Highway Group and VASA, the Superintendent's Association, in conjunction with OSBA and OASBO, are really going through and keeping abreast of the governor's budget, for education. So with Ohio 8, we will be meeting in Columbus the first week of March with the House leadership to talk about some of the concerns that the urban districts have. Some of those issues are around transportation and a couple of others. So I'll keep you apprised of how those conversations go.
Can I quick question for David? Is that tomorrow and not Wednesday?
Tomorrow, yes.
Okay, I had it the wrong day. Okay.
He's prepping, so as far as the president's report, I'm not going to steal too much of the superintendent's thunder because I know we've got this big announcement coming tomorrow. We did talk briefly today with the superintendent about the fact that there's a big series in the paper about leadership in the county, and I think as I look around this room and I look around this table, that Akron Public Schools does a fantastic job of having women and minorities represented, not just at this table, but definitely around the outside of this room. I think that we have some of the best women, minorities, not minorities, wonderful people that work for Akron Public Schools, and I just wanted to just say that publicly, how proud I am of that fact. So thank you all for all of your hard work and for all that you do and represent in the community. Mr. Pendleton has something to tell us.
We've got some good news to
We'd like to
present. I'll turn that over to Deb Falk. I'll talk about the finance end. She's going to tee up the First Energy Rebate Program.
Good evening. Over the past several years, we have been very fortunate to be part of the Mercantile Program for Energy Savings with First Energy. We were fortunate enough to get a confirmation last week that when we applied for the Public Utilities Commission rebate program for Oakville, Cyberlink, and Hatton, they were accepted and received with outstanding attributes. We now have received checks for each school totaling an amount of $83,681 that we were provided last week, along with the certificate for each building, which is being displayed currently by Mr. Pendleton. And understand that by doing these energy savings through the building program that Mr. Flesher oversees, we have saved for these three schools 1,538,762 kilowatts in energy for a grand total, and this is up to phase 3, of 4,549,968 kilowatts in the district for the CLCs that we have built, for a total savings of $423,198. This is a great program, and I think we should be very, very proud of the fact that we are active and participating in it. Okay?
Thank you.
So rebates today, just to repeat, those are right back to general fund, $423,000, presented to the Akron Board of Education in recognition of its valued participation and for committing to energy efficiency and peak demand reduction projects to First Energy Efficiency's compliance program. Thank you.
All right, committee reports this evening. I see we have some in legal and policy. Would you all like to lead those off?
We have for today, for the third reading, policy 6144, which is revised investments, policy 6423, revised use of credit cards, administrative guidelines 6423, revised use of credit cards, policy 6600, revised deposit of public funds, cash collection points. And I would ask that, I would like to make a motion that we accept these policies as read.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any further questions about these policies? Hearing none, roll call please.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
From finance.
We have one more
Oh, I'm
note
sorry.
on the contracts and policies. I spoke actually this afternoon with Rhonda Porter, and as she's embroiled in a number of due process hearings, we've not had the opportunity to meet, but we're going to try and start reviewing some of the policies that she feels should be addressed by the board, just amongst us as committeemen. And so Rhonda's going to forward some of those concerning policies to Bruce and I to review, to at least get the ball rolling on reviewing some of these things so we can fine-tune the policies and make them more applicable and working for our school board.
We're also still, we're gonna have y'all look at the rules and regs.
Yeah.
Is that
Right.
part of that step
That's
as
part
well?
of, that's part of what we need to do.
Okay. Good, perfect, thank you. Okay, now,
Just want to make a quick note that in the financial report, there's a supplement. Although it's obviously way too early to tell where we're headed with the state budget yet, there is a supplement that Mr. Pendleton has included as part of the monthly financial report, and he'll be updating that monthly to provide you some information about what's going on with the budget process. The executive budget proposes to increase right now the state share per pupil funding for Akron, which would also allow us a higher year-over-year funding increasing the cap, and that could increase our revenue for 2016 and 2017 significantly right now. But of course, we also receive approximately $6 million in tangible personal property tax that's due to be phased out. So Ryan is still keeping an eye on that and will keep us updated monthly, and so keep an eye on your monthly financial reports that you get from him.
really, those are very simple to read. I really appreciate that, how that's broken down.
Very nice.
Anything else from finance? Anything from instructional policy? Okay. Any unfinished business? I know the superintendent has some new business today.
Yeah, I'm sick of snow day. Under previous House Bill 59, of course, you're aware that the state switched the school calendar to hours versus days. Currently, we've used 6 snow days, Mrs. Folk, if I remember correctly, for the majority of our schools. Resnick has 7 calamity days used, and then early college and the STEM school have used 3.5. And we're, towards the end of February, but this week alone, it looks like tomorrow's gonna be dicey, and maybe Thursday or Friday morning. Then we have to get through the month of March. That's typical when we get ice and some snows. And then remember, one April, we got, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 inches of snow. I think it was opening day for Indians or something. So at any rate, and then once we get out of the winter weather, as you recall last year, or during one of our board meetings, we had to evacuate to the basement because of severe weather, tornadoes, and power outages. So I did consult with the Ohio Department of Education, and just to give us some more flexibility with our calendar, I would make the recommendation that we take our current calendar that was approved at the board meeting on February 10th, 2014, and just convert those same number of days to hours. What that would do for us is on the current minimum state calendar for hours, we would be at our elementary schools with our same calendar, 12 and a half days over the state minimum equivalent in hours. We, at the middle school level, 22 days over, and at the high school, 19 days over. I think that would just give us a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we handle, time out of school because of dangerous weather, power outages, etc. According to Doug Carpenter, the initial advice was you would need to consult with your labor agreement. Well, this wouldn't change anything because we're going to stay with the same number of days, and just for EMIS reporting purposes, we're going to report hours. So nothing would change with the calendar. It's just we would be looking at the equivalent number of hours for the same number of days that we've already approved for this school year.
I wish I had a visual.
I know,
I
it's
didn't.
it won't change our school year at all. It's just for EMIS purposes and to give us some additional flexibility in how we want to work with our students and their families and educators and making up days. We would have some additional flexibility. But we would still be in school. The calendar would not change.
And even though we've, and I'm supportive of that, did you talk to the unions at all about change?
Yeah, I think we let them know that we were thinking about going to this change and that it would not change their, the board-approved calendar. So the same number of holidays that we have off and the same end date of our school year, that would not change.
Will this affect planning for next year? Will we still basically stick with the same number of days and still have?
Yes.
I mean, it's better for our kids to be in school
Absolutely.
as much as we possibly can have them in school. So
Absolutely.
we wouldn't cut back on that next year, even though
Right.
we know we've got
Yes,
a glut of hours.
we would still have a glut of hours looking at the typical schedule for APS. Part of the problem is when we talk to the Ohio Department of Education, those folks are on hours. And it's confusing when we're calling about our days and well, everyone's on hours, and we have to remind them, well, until people have made a change, in our case by resolution, we would still be on days. So to just eliminate any of that confusion, I would recommend that we just vote, take a recommendation for a vote that we convert our current schedule to hours. It doesn't change anything in our schedule in terms of the balance of the school year. We're still in the same time as it did under day.
And at this point, this would prevent the need, at least right now, for the use of blizzard bags
Yes.
or anything else, because
Yes.
we'd be well within.
Exactly.
Just so,
So we don't need another, so we don't need our tutor afterwards.
we have allotted regularly 5 days.
Yes.
That's what we used to have.
Right.
When we go to hours, that gives us an equivalent to how many days? Am I asking the right way?
What we're saying is that if we go to hours and approve that, our current schedule would be for elementary schools, 12 and a half days over the state minimum required number of days we would have to be in session. For the high schools, we would be 19 days over. Basically, our day calendar exceeds what the state is
What the
saying.
state, okay, I see, okay. We're already hours-wise well above the
Yes.
state minimum
Exactly.
required.
And the state minimum includes a built-in number of calamity days
Right.
anyway, so we're
Yes.
really,
Okay.
Why did you say
Most
that from the
districts,
beginning?
I know.
I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any other questions about this? Hearing none, roll call please.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
We do have a need for executive session. So pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22G1, I ask for a motion that we adjourn into executive session for the purpose of considering employment.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Sims?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.